Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon, from the historical documentary, Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. I deliberately made a video about dice towers before I filmed this one on dice. Dice towers are machines easily explained, yet the dice passing through their wooden guts, why, those are creatures of myth and legend, trickier to pin down, as elusive as invisible unicorns right in front of your face, if you care to believe that nonsense. Here's the hangover from my dice tower video. I don't plan on rolling dice en masse across the gaming table for another film. Using towers keeps those lethal cubes from bashing into the camera. And what do you know? In filming that, to prove a point, I almost knocked one camera off the table. You also see my begloved hand reaching out to lift away a shard of plastic from a dice container that lost its edge when a waterfall of red cubes tumbled to the cloth. Those dicey random number generators are dangerous and must be stopped. Away with rolling dice, free and untrammeled, I vowed. And yet, I knew I'd make this public information epic about dice themselves. In short, too late. I'm forced to roll more dice, under controlled conditions, I hope. Just what the hell are dice? They are objects of mystery, cloaked in a fog of superstition. It's best to salt the soup with a quote from Francis Galton. As an instrument for selecting at random, I have found nothing superior to dice. Galton was scribbling in 1890. We may excuse his overlooking electronic random number generators. Was he right then? If he found nothing superior to dice, perhaps he wasn't looking hard enough. There is an argument made in favour of cards, with the provision that they are shuffled properly. Your definition of cards shuffled improperly may vary wildly when measured against my view. However, we are here to cover the mad subject of dice and the slightly madder matter of the players who throw them. I've seen players drop dice in drinks by accident and on purpose, not just in cups or mugs, mind, no, inside cans too. Players throw dice away in disgust and obtain the results they were after once the numbers no longer matter. Borrowed dice never roll well. Tiny dice are banned from the table. The die is not a spinning top. Roll one die or several dice. Confuse the two words at your peril. Dice burn out. Players talk to their dice, coax their dice, blow on their dice, cajole their dice, threaten the dice to perform well, else they face retirement. Dice rest comfortably in velvet bags, pampered in the lap of ludological luxury. I've witnessed players gnash dice in frustration at lackluster rolls. Not recommended. All it takes is a coughing fit over the gnashing of a 20-sider and you'll forever be that player, the one carted off in an ambulance, blue in the face, struggling to utter one last game-related saying, hoping the ambulance crew will record your epitaph for gaming posterity. This is several steps down from actual posterity. Dice lived with us in many forms for thousands of years, and that's just the dice in my collection. Players still say they roll the bones, even if dice are rarely made of bone. Almost all the dice I own are plastic, with a few wooden exceptions. I never had the crushing need to purchase metal or bone dice, so you won't see any in this video. My dice are also mainly opaque. Don't let that stop you from buying all kinds of sparkly see-through designs. Where to start? Dice are multi-sided, rollable objects bearing numbers or other specialized symbols. This definition barely hints at the body of superstition built around them down the years. Throw the dice, let them tumble, wait for them to stop, and then read the symbols or numbers uppermost for a result, as if you are casting entrails and making a prophecy. Almost all dice are numbered, and they are used in games of chance. It may surprise you to learn that dice also feature in games of skill, an utterance considered heresy by people who prefer to play games of skill without the involvement of dice. This video is not about those players. Here's the standard polyhedral set, familiar to enthusiasts of role-playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons, Ferrets and Felines, and Bunnies and Burrows. I made one of those up. These dice are given standard notation in game rulebooks. First, list the number of dice being rolled, then use the letter D, and finally note the number of sides on your dice. This 6-sided die, using the formula, is 1d6. Roll 3d6. Occasionally, you're asked to roll dice and throw in a modifier. Roll d6 plus 1. Let's invent rules off the cuff. Modifiers to wargames come in the form of defensive bunkers. Say, roll a d6 minus 1, representing a tougher nut to crack. Flamethrower units roll d6 plus 1 against bunkers, and so on. Advanced modifiers include more dice. Roll 3d6 plus 1 minus 1d8. Try to keep that level of shit out of your games. Why go to those lengths? To generate a specific number range. Either redesign your game or find an unusual sided die. If you must roll a value from 1 to 15, don't roll 2d8 minus 1, just buy a d15. Or change your game to fit the d20. Complexity in games does not equal fun in games. Discuss. Though remember, simplicity in games does not equal fun in games. Number of dice rolled, D. Number of sides on dice, modifier. Now you know the basic notation. It cannot be unlearned. You're stuck with it, and even the fiery pit of Mount Doom has no hold over that. This is the true 1d6 forged by the truth of dice is another thing, depending entirely on the manufacturing process. A standard dice set doesn't begin with a die at all. The D2 is a 2-sided die, better known as a coin. If you must have a D2, custom dice are available, strange-looking 2-sided near cubes, or a D6 printed with the numbers 1 and 2 repeatedly. Any numbered die is convertible to the D2 format. Odd number equals 1, even number equals 2. Above the level of the basic coin there's a D3. This is 6-sided with 1 to 3 printed twice, so there are pencil or lozenge-style dice that roll along and come to a stop with the same effect. If you don't have custom D3, roll a D6 and chop the result in half. The D4 breaks that comment I made earlier. Read the symbol or number uppermost for a result. This pyramidal die doesn't have a top face. The graphic design improved down the years, but again, for those of you who just don't like these dice that never roll smoothly, dice that are harder to pick up, you might as well opt for the pencil-shaped version printed with 1 to 4 on its horizontal sides. Here are 2d4, with the results reading from the edge down at table level. That arrangement may be the most confusing layout for beginning players to grasp. On this alternative arrangement, the eye is drawn away from table level to the point of the pyramid as it should be. If you really struggle with this one, buy an 8-sider that's printed 1 to 4 twice over. So far, I've ignored the D0, Sarky reference to rolling when you have no chance of success, and the D1, no less Sarky. There is no D5 in a standard polyhedral set. I'll speak of irregular dice shortly. Here's the workhorse of board gaming, the D6. These dice are numbered rather than dotted. They don't have pips on them, the pips you'd see on casino-style dice. These are role-playing game dice. The RPG world operates under its own curious laws of physics. In short, it's a pain in the arse to place 20 pips on the face of a D20. To differentiate 6 from the number 9, dice carry an underscore or dot to signify reading direction. Unusually, these dice are underscored to confirm the number 6, even though this is a D6 and that is a D8. You can't confuse 6 with a number that isn't on the actual die. The D8 is used often enough in the RPG world. If I had to single out a die that just doesn't feel the gaming feels, well, stay tuned for the much-maligned D12. A D10 doesn't always operate alone. It may be combined with another D10 to form percentile dice. 2 dice rolled together generate a number from 01 to 00. If both dice are numbered 1 to 10, the player must specify one die as high. In this case, red high gives us the leading result. To avoid confusion, the D10 is available with 10s printed on the die, as here. You know this die will roll 70 or 80 or 90 and not the other. The D100 is also available as a 100-sider that I cannot recommend. This is a gaming table, damn it, not an effing golf course. 3 D10s string together to form the ludicrous D1000. Roll any number from 001 to 000. I've seen it used in one game, Time Master. Players patrol time itself and try to stop the alteration of history. At the end of the adventure, players' mistakes were added up to generate a number. Then the dreaded D1000 came into play. A roll over the value of the mistakes meant the players succeeded. If mistakes caught up with them, history changed. Sounds good on the page, but it was a load of old bollocks in the game. To use 3 dice in that way, specify the order. Roll red high, white middle, and blue low for your history-altering result. This monster is the D12 and is best used to select the month of the year of setting up a calendar of events in your RPG world. There is a problem with the D12, and that's apart from being the most unpopular die. Many a time I've asked a player to roll a D10 and the resounding cry comes back from Spinal Tap, 11. I suspect you are rolling an unloved die in error. Please leave the room, re-enter and try again. Year in, year out, game designers stumble from the wilderness with rules for games based on 12-sided dice. Where's the love? Across the street at a party hosted by the D6, attended by all the D8s and D10s. We jump to the mighty D20. This is available numbered as 1 to 20 or as 1 to 10 twice over. I bought a pair of these uninked and had to use 2 pens on a single die, even though the numbers are from 1 to 10, and again, but with a plus sign added. The ink has worn away from overuse. I didn't re-ink them as I switched to using other dice. This one has a terrible scar here from production, echoed in the scar worn by its near twin, which leads me to a point on accuracy, on truth. How true is a die? Don't believe for a moment that your dice are random. Production methods alter the chances. Whether or not the dice have square corners or rounded, weather is a factor, as is altitude beyond sea level, and what you had for breakfast. Here's the thing, I don't care. Avoid obviously flawed dice, broken dice, worn dice, and dice smeared in strawberry jam. Just pick the bloody dice up and start rolling. You roll what you roll. Deal with it. What do we use these dice for? Anything is the standard answer. In war games, dice determine combat results on tables matching attack strength against defense strength. For backgammon, dice provide movement values and open up tactical choices in moving as well. In role-playing games, dice resolve tasks, create a character, choose skills, assign points to those skills on a 1 to 100 basis. Was your 60% first aid skill good enough? Roll a D100. On 1 to 60, you saved the day. I must return to the topic of unusual dice. Generally, the opposite sides of a die add up to give the number of faces on that die plus 1. Opposing sides on a D6 add up to 7. For a D8, the faces add to give 9. And for a D20, the opposite faces add to give 21. The stranger the die, the less likely this generality applies. This lumbering beast doesn't stick to that path, even though it is a D20. Spindown Die was a martial art technique pioneered by Bruce Lee in 1970 while working on an Ingrid Bergman movie, and that is a board gaming fact. This giant die isn't meant for rolling. Spindown dice are used as trackers in games. The numbers are located next to one another, making it easier to spin and count down or count up, tracking game quantities, damage, spell power, number of sheep in a pen, and so on. The rearrangement of standard numbering on a regular-sized spin-down die makes it slightly easier to tip your result into the 1 to 10 range or the 11 to 20 range if you start rolling, how to put this, artfully, yes, artfully, in the style of a dodger. There aren't enough hours in the day to cover odd dice and strange symbols, quicker to roll a few bones and show you instead. Production affects accuracy, as I'd already hinted. That is of more value to professional players at the gambling tables. Printed dice see the printing wear away in time. They suffer less from the problem faced by pipped dice. Dice with pips drilled into them are unbalanced ever so slightly. There's hardly any die material drilled out on the one side. On the opposite side, there's 6 times as much material drilled away, creating a mild imbalance affecting accuracy. No, I've never cared about that, though in a video on dice I feel duty-bound to bring it to your attention. These ancient bones are worn away, making them less reliable, but they are shaky for another reason. The dice were sold unpainted. If you purchase unmarked dice, your main options are to use paint, ink, or wax. If you can stand the eye strain, leave them plain. I used wax here, though I've inked and painted other dice down the centuries. How are my dice affected? It's well known that my dice-rolling abilities are legendarily bad. Players lean forward in anticipation of seeing how badly I roll the bones. I don't hold the record for worst dice roller in the world, but I can't be far off that list. Superstition, and the thorny topic of dice etiquette. Borrowed dice never roll well. Players don't seem to invest enough psychic potential, mana, or the life force of small sacrificial bunnies when rolling borrowed dice. This is all superstitious guff. I'll move along to procedural matters. Once upon a time I inherited a game, and it came with tiny dice. These infinitesimal icosahedrons. I tried inking one of them as a D10, filling both sets of 10 with the same colour, and stopped. If you roll these across a bare table, they will clatter for miles. They constitute a choking hazard for the small child. Flee the gaming room, small child, for dice are not to be gnashed or swallowed. My plan was to use the micro dice as a new D100. After all, dice burn out once rolled badly 3 times in a game. That is the law, and you must over-dramatically select new bones to roll. They've never been rolled in a game. Too easy to knock aside, ignore, forget about, swallow. They are impractical. I have a few D6 smaller, but I cannot seem to locate the incredible shrinking dice. Something tells me they're part of a portable backgammon set. Another player bought an identical set of D20s. I recognized them and said they were too small to use. The player insisted. When you roll dice right in front of you and you can't read the result, retire those dice or bring out the magnifier. No one could see the results, and the player in charge of that game banned those electron-sized nuisances. Something else that's banned from the table is the notion that your dice are for spinning. On a bare table, a D20 that's spinning and spinning and spinning. No, this is not Inception, though you could slow motion crash a van into a river in the time it takes for the D20 to fall to gravity's blade, spinning and spinning and spinning. The die is not a spinning top. Spinning and spinning and spinning. Where were we? It's poor form to spin your dice. Roll 2d20, do not spin them, do not pass go. Go to game jail, go directly to game jail. We'll let you out when your behaviour improves and not before. It goes without saying, though must be said, that if you want to juggle, then learn to be a professional juggler. Hit yourself in the face with juggling clubs a few 100 times. Don't juggle dice. And when rolling dice, don't try to bowl over the enemy soldiers you're attacking. No one will thank you for that approach. How do you roll dice? Preferably in a dice tower. Unless you're playing backgammon, then you make use of a baffle box. This is a dice tower by another name. An alternative to the tower is the dice tray, whether improvised plastic tub, board game box lid, wooden tray, or folding dice tray as shown here. Dice cups are for rolling dice from and not to. They are generally a feature of backgammon games in which dice towers, baffle boxes, are unavailable. The mere thought of a dice cup recalls to mind the dreaded Yahtzee incident, a story for which the world is not yet prepared. How you roll dice is your affair, but there are a few finer points worth noting. From backgammon we have the term cocked dice, meaning the dice didn't land flat or landed illegally and must be rolled again. The player who rolls cocked dice persistently is a cock. Cocked dice. There are other possibilities. One die lands flat on top of another. This is still no good, and the dice are rolled again. The dice fall off the table. No matter how far they roll across the carpet, through doors, out into the street, and across the road into a neighbouring county, the rolling player will inevitably demand jokingly that an excellent roll is allowed to stand. In gaming terminology, this is bollocks, and the player is at it. Percentile dice can only be rolled together. If one die lands cocked, lands flat on another die, or goes off the table, roll both again. If in doubt, roll again. And if you're not in doubt but everyone else is sharpening pitchforks, roll again. In a game run by a player, particularly a role-playing game, that games master or dungeon master or keeper of arcane lore has the right of way. Any roll may be disavowed, good, bad, or indifferent. This veto is used for many reasons. I'll return to that in a video about getting the rules wrong. Ignoring cocked dice? If you roll 35d6 for damage in an ungodly game that calls for heathenish ritual dice sacrifice and one die drops off the table, you'd be excused for rolling just that one again. Fellow players are not sadists after all, except for the ones who clearly are. No one expects you to roll 35 again if you just dropped one. Clean rolls on the table, no spinning, bowling, juggling, no microscope required to read the results. Cocked dice are rolled again. Use dice towers or dice trays if you can. Electronic random number generators are beyond the scope of this video. Anything else? Leaving dice behind at a venue? This is inevitable. Storing your dice in bags? Recommended. Talking to your dice? I can't help you with that. And now return to the concept of irregular dice. The more faces there are in a die, the greater the resemblance to a sphere, with one exception, a round die. Technically it has but the one surface. Also technically it's never quite round enough. I've only ever seen one of these round six-siders in action. The round d6 is, to use a technical term, fucking rubbish. Don't do drugs, and don't shit a round d6 onto the table. Unusual sided dice. In the world of 3D printing, it's easy to forge dice that are, freaky looking. These are 5 and 7 and 9 and 11-siders. You name it, you can print it, even if you have no use for it. A d7. To what end? Calculating the days of the week by the roll of the die? Alas, or rather fortunately, I don't have any of those dice to show you. They look lumpy and awkward, like porridge left in the desert. There are a few dice here with symbols. A direction die, which was free with other dice. Of course I didn't buy it. Dedicated combat dice with at-a-glance resolution. Themed dice that may or may not be legible. There are such things as left-handed and right-handed dice describing the running order of numbers. Stare at a d6 with 1 uppermost. Turn the die to see 3 faces at once, the 1, 2, and 3. If the running order is clockwise, the die is left-handed. A quick poll of my dice shows that RPG dice, numbered dice, are left-handed. The pipped dice run anti-clockwise and are all right-handed. I checked all the dice on that table using the handy skill of lying. You'll find pipped Eastern dice are left-handed, pipped Western dice are right-handed. Games come with dice. Role-playing games used to be boxed and came with dice too. The boxed RPG is costlier to manufacture than the book-based RPG is. Tax comes into it. Fear not. Polyhedral dice are readily available from dedicated dice companies online. Handy buying hint. Purchase a set. Don't buy D12s in droves. A set of D4, D6, D8, D10, second D10, D12, and D20 will get you started. Do you ever finish once you've started? I bought practically all of these dice online recently for use in these videos. My core working dice collection stabilized many moons ago. You buy some, others end up in your collection, 1 or 2 sneak in from nowhere, and you wonder how they arrived. Make clean rolls. Don't knock the game over. Learn to live with the dice superstitions of others. Choking hazards will get you killed. Eat food while gaming, do not eat dice. Oh, there's an exception to that. I received a free edible die with a warning on the back of the packet that there may be a laxative effect. Obvious pun alert. This is a D8.